the sweet honeybee.
I've made up a sheet also of beekeeping needs and terms, terminologies, definitions, and I'll reference some of these. I may not hit every one, but these are just the basic ones that we talk about, and I want you to understand, you know, some of the definitions of what I'm talking about. I'm sure you're familiar, even if you're not a beekeeper. This is a smoker. Why use a smoker? Well, I've talked about how bees communicate with each other, and I said they communicate through dance language, but they also communicate with chemicals that their body produces. And those chemicals are called pheromones. And they're mostly in a liquid form, okay? In very, very minute, small parts. They talk about beekeepers versus bee havers. You know, anyone can be a bee haver and have bees, but to keep bees, it's like animal husbandry, taking care of a horse, a dog, any animal. You feed your animals. We feed honeybees sometimes in the year when nectar is not there, especially after the end of July. There's what we call a dearth of nectar, and sometimes there's a fall nectar flow, sometimes there's not. So we feed bees sugar syrup. Okay, these are in-hive feeders. They go in a hive just like a frame would, and these have got little inserts that they can crawl around on, and I mix up sugar syrup.
Pass that around, Bruce?
Pardon?
Can I pass that around?
Yeah, it takes, you know, I'm just a small beekeeper, 30-some hives, but, you know, I fed 500 pounds of sugar last year to my bees, and that's one to one, 1 part sugar to 1 part water. You and I don't like to eat a lot of sugar, so you need to think about honeybees in a different way, because nectar out here in the flower is sometimes, you know, well, it's all sugar. It's all sucrose. Nectar is. Bees convert sucrose into glucose and fructose. They change it chemically when they turn it into honey. So honey has less than 5% sucrose, okay? But bees need sugar. Why do they need it? For energy to fly. They have to be able to consume it just to be able to fly out and come back. It's their carbohydrates. And pollen that they gather is their protein. They need both. They have to gather a lot of protein to feed the babies, okay? The nurse bees, the young bees consume a lot of pollen, and that helps them to be able to feed the larvae on the frames before it's capped over in the growth process of a honeybee. So that's why we feed sugar. Yes. So you hear somebody saying a nuke hive, nuke short for nucleus. This is typically a 5-frame nuke, and you buy these. You can buy a 5-frame colony from a beekeeper, and right now they go for about $190 to $225 a piece, and that has 5 frames, at least 3.5 frames of brood in different stages of brood, and then 1 frame has a lot of pollen and nectar on it, and they're usually ready to put right into a 10-frame box, which is what this is. This gets put in here, and that's one way to start a colony. Or you can buy a package of bees that's just in a plastic container or a wooden box with screen all around it. That's called a package of bees, and that has about 10,000 bees in it, 10 to 15,000 bees in it, plus a new queen. This would have a new queen in it as well. It's supposed to when you sell it in the springtime. So that's how beekeepers get started. Yes, ma'am.
So do those get filled with sugar water and then get placed in the hives with the bees?
Yes. They do. They just get put in the. They just put in this box, and you know, you take out a frame. Put this in. Now this is a little bit wider, so you know, you may only. This holds 10 frames, so you probably would only put 8 frames in here and then put this in there. But this would be 5 frames when you transfer this in here.
So do you have to make sure that the frames you buy will fit in your hive? Like, is that something you have to, or is it all the same size?
That's a good question. She's asking about the size of the frame. So right here on the top of this handout, basic hive box equipment. So, you know, to get started in beekeeping, your basic hive will consist of a bottom board, and I don't have that on this box, but there's a separate section that's called the bottom board. It can either be solid or it can have a screen in it, what they call a screen bottom board, that it allows air to come up into the hive. There's plus and minuses to all this, and beekeepers like to discuss those differences. But and then you have, this is called a deep box because it's 9 5/8 tall. It's called a deep. You hear someone refer to a deep, that's what they're talking about, that size. And then there's a medium that can go on top of that, and I'll show you some mediums down there. Well, that first hive you can see above the yellow box, which is a deep also, there's 2 mediums on top of that, and they are 6 5/8 tall. So they take a little bit smaller frame. So, you know, the basic setup is a bottom board, a hive body, they call it, and then super on top for honey. Now you can have configurations that you can see down there. The first hive, for instance, has 2 deeps, and that's actually a double deep hive setup. Or some of those hives have a deep and a medium as a brood. And so brood, and you see the definitions there on the first page. The brood refers to the eggs, larvae, and larvae are pupal, immature bees in individual wax cells. That's called the brood. That's where the babies are. It's like the nursery of the hive, okay? And that's what's in the brood box, but they bring in a lot of pollen and nectar also, and I'll show you a frame down there. So they make like an oval shape of brood. So you might see a capped brood, so let's get back to the biology. A queen lays an egg. That egg emerges from this shell. You can call it hatching, but it's not like a chicken egg hatching, but it has it's called eclosion. It's an outer that just dissolves, and that larvae is born 3 days later, and from day 3 or day 4 to day 8, that larvae grows exponentially. And that larvae is fed by the nurse bees like 2,000 times during that day 4 through day 8. Okay, and then the bees cap that individual cell over with some wax and some particles from the molting, because the larvae molts. It actually has 5 molts, and the last molt, that outer exoskeleton, the debris, the bees use that and some wax and cap over the larvae cells, but the pupa then that results can still breathe through that capping. When honey is capped, it's all beeswax, and it's not porous like a brood cell is. So brood, then honey on top. That's basically, and then you have different types of top covers. This is called a telescoping top cover that goes around, around the top. I have a lot of top covers that are called migratory, which you see almost on all those hives down there. It's not something that caps over. It just lays on it and has a front and a back place to it. Any more questions? Yes.
Is there a benefit to productivity for having different size frames of boxes? Is that why the choice?
Okay. Is there a benefit? The question is the productivity depending on what size of boxes and frames that you use. Let me say, if you have a deep box, you put a deep frame in. If you have a medium frame, you put a medium box, you put a medium frame in, which is, about three quarters of the size. So let me say this: the weight of it is something that you need to consider. How much it weighs when it's full of honey, or when it's full of even pollen and brood. It's heavier also. So I still use a lot of deep boxes. I'm probably getting to the age when I maybe shouldn't be doing that as much, but I still do it. But how much do you think a box like this full of honey weighs? You have 10 frames. 10 frames in here.
50 pounds?
Full of honey.
50 pounds?
Huh?
50?
Nope. I'll just tell you. I weighed one time. 92 pounds.
Wow. How much of that is honey?
That's a good question. How much of it is honey? I have almost filled a 5-gallon bucket,
Wow.
filtering
Nice.
a deep full of honey. I mean full.
Nice.
When you start out, would you use more than a nuke to start out with, or one box? What's your configuration? When you start out, you're just using one box to start with, okay? Because you have 5 frames in a nucleus colony, and you have another 5 frames that just basically looks like this, okay? The bees put wax on this, and that's why that's why when you start out, you do feed your bees sugar syrup, unless there's a strong nectar flow, but they have to consume a lot of sugar syrup in order to produce wax. So did you know honeybees makes wax? They have wax glands on the bottom edge of their abdomen. I want to say 4 to 5 pairs. I forget that exact number, but pairs of wax glands. And when they make wax, little snowflake-looking small pieces of wax come out of the underside of their abdomen, Isn't that amazing? And the other bees pick that up and they chew it with their mandibles, their jaws, and form, and they make this amazing octagonal shape on what comb, and I'll show you something down there like that. They're just amazing. They make this wax all on this sheet, and the individual cells are tilted, slightly tilted up 13 degrees, so the honey doesn't fall out, the nectar doesn't fall out of individual cells, and they make the wax that stores your honey, or stores baby bees in it, because that's where they also raise bees in individual cells, and they feed them pollen transformed into bee bread that you'll read here. That's one of the definitions. Pollen protein food collected by bees, processed by the bees in a fermentation process and stored in beeswax cells, and that's what they feed to larvae, and they also consume a lot of it themselves, the young bees do. Okay, did I answer your question?
So you'd start with that, and then as you grow it bigger, then you start adding more boxes?
Yeah, once you have, let's say, 7 frames filled out with bees on 7 frames, a lot of activity, then you put on another box. Yeah, and now in the springtime, you know, when the nectar starts, I put on supers. I put some supers on. Some of you beekeepers, I put some on in February this year. We had a warm February. It was amazing.
Yep.
And there was wax being drawn out in February, and kind of unheard of around here. But I put some supers on hives in February, and I have a few hives that I have 3 supers on already. But you can put on more than 1 to start off with supers. That's not going to hurt anything in the beginning of the year.
Bruce, what's a super? What's a super?
A super. Yeah. So when I refer to a super, it's just a box that is going to have honey stored in it. It doesn't have to be a medium size. It can be a deep, if you like, daily weight training, and you want to go into muscle building, put in all deeps for supers. You have to give water to your bees if they don't have water. And you see that big blue bucket down there? That has rainwater in it, and it has stuff that the bees can walk on, old wood or whatever that they can drink. They drink a lot of water. They carry water just like they gather pollen. They have water carriers. You know, they bring water into their hive, and they use water to cool the hive in the summer. Evaporative cooling. Water, have their own HVAC system. But that's what this is for too. What is he doing with that? You cut little slices of that, and it floats in the water, and the bees can land on that and drink with. That's what I use that. Why do I light a smoker? I light a smoker because of the pheromones that they communicate with. The smoke masks that communication, and one of the communication they communicate is an alarm pheromone. So when a bee stings you, that puts out a pheromone, and the other bees can smell that, and they go to it. If I get stung, I've got stung before. I'm not bothered by stings, though. Some would do, and I understand that. But I put a puff of smoke on it for one thing. But puffing smoke in it inside the hive masks that.
Do you use smudge for the smoke? What do you use?
What do you use for smoke? I use I use grass. I use old wood. You know, I think they call it punk wood. You know, I pick up in the woods and stuff like that.
Like kindling?
Yeah, just
Shavings?
yeah. You can use shavings.
How about smudge?
I don't buy stuff though. I just yeah. I mean,
Anything that will burn that's dry.
yeah. You want to create a fire in the bottom of your smoker to start with.
Okay.
And then you put stuff on top of the fire
Okay.
that, you know,
Like that.
that will smolder, yeah.
Why your frame is not a completely empty frame? Why start with something if they make their own wax?
Why do you start with this?
Yeah.
Well, for one thing, is there a benefit? Yes, when you extract this, if you just had wax, they wouldn't go through an extractor very well. You couldn't extract it with an extractor unless you can put wires across it. There's wiring methods and all for using wax comb, but I use this plastic cell. I know a lot of people have an issue with plastic, but I will tell you that I use the cappings off my hives and I melt down wax to put over this. This just has wax painted on it, and the wax in America that you buy from foundation is known to have some chemicals in it because of agricultural practices and all. So I use my own wax cappings, and to be more. But Faith has a block of wax that they purchased, and you can buy wax, and that's what I do. I either filter my own wax, or I will buy a block of wax and then melt it in an old crock pot that my wife has given me license to use. That's another story. But anyway, and I paint that on that, because if you don't do that, you'll have burr comb, what they call burr comb. That's one of your definitions also. That doesn't look good and it won't work. You have to scrape it off and have them do it again. So you might as well just have wax put on it. You can buy foundation that's triple waxed. It's extra money. The companies will put extra wax on it, but I use my own wax for that. The biggest threat to bees is called the varroa mite, and you will see that as one of your definitions. And you've got to keep a handle on varroa mites in your hive, because they came in the United States in the mid '80s, and they killed all the feral hives in the United States. The varroa mite did, and they killed half of the beekeepers' hives in the United States. That's my dad and my father-in-law. They lost all their hives from the varroa mites in the mid '80s. And
is that the same as a beetle?
no, there's a hive beetle that's different that came in the United States about 2005 from another country also. And so, yeah, you have to, there's pests in beehives. You have to, it's part of beekeeping, unfortunately, that you have to work at this, but.
Is that pretty common, Bruce? I mean, when you open up your hives, do you find mites that you gotta eradicate somehow?
Is it common to have, everybody has varroa mites in their hives, everyone. They're only kidding themselves if, there may be only a few, but it's something that you test, you monitor for, and this is a monitoring device here where you use, the common alcohol from a pharmacy, you pour in here, and you get a half cup of bees, which is 300 bees approximately, and you put in here, on this alcohol, and you shake, 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 and for a few to 5 minutes, and then you lift this up, and this keeps all the bees in that cup, and you look up to the bottom, and you can count the mites in the bottom of this. Okay, and so you know, if you have 10 mites, you divide 10 by 300. What is that? But that gives you your infestation. The perceived infestation, I want to make that clear, because you've got mites that are inside the capped cells. That's where mites grow. That's where they live. A female mite goes into a cell before it's capped, and then she has, this is interesting, she'll have a male bee, produce a male bee. She'll produce female mites, a male mite, a female mite. They mate with their brother and mite, and they can produce 6 mites or so in one cell. Now that can...
That's a bunch of mighty mites.
Mighty mites. That's a lot of mites. When you got 3,000 cells on one frame, you know, of course, they mainly go into the drone cells. But that's... So let's walk down there, and we can finish talking down there. When I first became a beekeeper, I thought, you know, these bees would just fly out and attack me. But that just doesn't happen. At least not. Now that is beautiful. But that's what comb looks like that they build, and it just doesn't get any better than that. And this is full of nectar.
So did that frame start out with the plastic?
Yeah, this started out with just a piece of plastic, just like the ones I showed you up there.
When did you put that super on?
Just in the last couple months. I mean, I don't know that it was even 2 months ago, but yeah. But now it's what we call the Nectar Flow, and so they need the Nectar Flow in order to make wax. Here, as you can tell, is a new frame, you know, that was just put on.
Can you hold that up real quick for us?
Yeah. Now, see, I said that there's 10 frames in a box, but once I start drawing the wax out, I take one frame out and space those frames out, so the bees you can see the width of it is fat. So when you go to extract, you know, you can take your extracting knife and you just barely slice the wax off the top in order to spin the honey out. And so that's why I want them to draw it out. And I've had one frame one time that had weighed 7.5 pounds on a deep frame. That was probably the 92-pound hive or 92-pound box. So
When you're extracting right now, what are you looking for?
That's a good question. What am I looking for? And I'm checking. Well, I'm just checking to see if they're bringing in nectar, if they're, you know, what that looks like. Now, see, I put on a new box here. Just well, actually, it was just this week. And so that's what this looks like. I forget what day this week I put it on, but you can't. But I don't know if you can see, they're already starting to draw the wax out.
So they're drawing the wax out to build with it? So they reuse it?
Yeah, they all that wax that you saw on that frame, they drew all that out, to above this wood frame plane here.
Are the mason jars on top of your hive for your sugar water?
Yes, that's what it's for. Yes, that's another way of feeding. So this has a hole in it, little tiny holes in the lid, and that's how I feed in the spring some. They don't take much feed in the spring, but when they come out of winter time, a lot of times they don't have much food, and they need some food to start the spring off with. So
How often do you actually open them up and check them and inspect them?
that's a good question. How often do you open up? So you need to look in your hives starting in the end of March, really once a week. I mean, you could wait once every 10 days, but it's something that you have to keep on, especially in the springtime when your hives can swarm. Swarm is natural. A swarm means that it's the way honeybees are designed. They're designed to swarm because that's how they propagate themselves. What are the top 3 things I'm looking for? I'm looking at the population of the hive. And I just opened up a super. I didn't open up the brood area, okay? But when you have supers on, you're looking at the honey, the amount of nectar that's come into the hive. Are they building wax? Are they? Do they have enough bees? I just put this box on over the weekend. Actually, this is a honey super that's in a deep box, but there's not much in it. But so this is going to look different to you because this is a brood box where they're raising babies.
Those are babies? Nice. Wow.
So you see those cap cells? There is a baby bee under every cell. That's what you call brood, capped brood. And what when they talk about, well, what's the pattern of your capped brood? Because that kind of indicates how good the queen is, okay? You see very few blank holes. It's a solid brood pattern. That's excellent, okay?
Building on top of that, in the center, is that a second layer?
No, That's a good observation and a good question. Those are actually drone cells. See how it looks like it's a what I talked about, a bullet? Those are male bees, and there's a male bee right now coming out, emerging. They emerge themselves, every bee does. They chew out and they come out by themselves. They wiggle around till they can squeeze out of the cell. That's exactly what that one's doing. So now here on this side, you know, you don't see a full pattern, but that's...
How long what's your goal when you open a hive? How long do you want to be in and out without making them angry?
Well, you don't have to, so, you know, if I'm looking in a hive and I see that there's brood and everything's healthy looking, and I can see eggs, larvae, which I'm looking at right now, real tiny larvae that's just emerged a few days ago, then I don't look for the queen. I just put it back and close it up. That's all I need. That's all I need to know. You don't have to see the queen if you see eggs and small larvae.
So you're looking for activity, maybe looking for the queen?
I'm not really looking for the queen. I'm looking to see if there's still babies being produced. You know, if life is going on. Of course, you're going to have empty cells when the bees emerge. They leave an empty cell, and then you're going to have pollen mixed in with this, which is what's happening in some of those cells. They need a lot of pollen. A hive will consume 40 to 60 pounds of pollen in a year's time. They eat a lot of pollen, but notice, you know, and the bees will crawl on my finger some when I'm doing this, but you know, notice that they're not trying to sting me or anything. This is the entrance where they go in and out. Yeah, they go in, they come, you know, and then that's a queen excluder. This metal piece is a queen excluder that the queen can't crawl through. Here's a plastic queen excluder. The queen can't go in through here because her abdomen's too big to go through there.
So she stays in there all the time?
So she stays in the hive the whole time. Okay. She stays in that box unless they swarm, and she goes with the old hive. Right. And she has to lose about 40% of her body weight in order to fly with the... So the other bees actually put her on a diet, and they run her around the hive so she can lose weight. I'm not making this up. And the bees themselves, they gorge with honey, fill up their honey stomach, and they gain a sizable percentage of weight, so that when the swarm leaves, they have honey in their honey stomach. A bee has two stomachs, a honey stomach and a digestive stomach. The honey stomach's called a honey crop, and that's all they hold is just honey and water in that honey stomach.
Bruce, I'm going to go to that second question I had. If you're setting up a new hive, what's the top 3 things you need to consider in location?
Top location. You don't want it to be in the middle of trees. You need sunlight hitting your hive. And the second thing I would say is you don't want it in a high traffic area. You know, number 3, you want there to be a water. You want to provide water, or you want a water source nearby. Thank you. You've been a great group to talk with.